Let's start by looking at the interest on a simple loan contract. Assume Arctica's government borrowed 10 million Arctica cubes at an annual interest rate of 5%. The interest is due and paid at the end of each year. The principal will be repaid after 5 years in one lump sum repayment. In this case, the annual interest expense would be 5% of 10 million. That's 500,000 Arctica cubes. The annual interest payable is the same in all 5 years, and at the end of year 5, the government repays the principal plus the interest for the last year. If we compile annual GFS and the government pays the loan interest when due, then there is no difference between the cash paid and the accrual amounts to be recorded. We only need to split the debt service payment in year 5 between interest of 0.5 million Arctica cubes, which is an expense, and the principal repayment of 10 million Arctica cubes, which is a redemption of liabilities. Now, let's look at another example. Assume the government in Arctica borrowed the 10 million Arctica cubes by issuing a zero-coupon bond. A zero-coupon bond is an instrument that pays no periodic interest or coupons to the holder. Instead, the bond is issued at a discounted value, and the difference between the redemption price, the bond face value, and the discounted issuance price is the bond interest, which is recorded in the GFS framework. So let's consider our example where the government in Arctica issues a zero-coupon bond at a discounted value of 10 million Arctica cubes. Let's also assume the same conditions as with the loan, that is, an implicit interest rate of 5% and a bond that matures after 5 years. At that point, the government pays back the full amount, both the principal and the interest component. Now let's think how we should record that interest component in the GFS framework. At the beginning of year 1, the government borrowed 10 million Arctica cubes at an interest rate of 5%. It would have had to pay 0.5 million Arctica cubes at the end of the year. However, since this is a zero-coupon bond, it does not pay any interest until maturity of the bond. So, how much interest would it have to pay in year 2? Would it be 0.5 million cubes for the 10 million cubes originally borrowed again? No. Since it did not pay the interest for year 1, it now actually owes 10.5 million Arctica cubes to the creditor. Thus, the interest accruing on this amount would be higher, specifically 5% of 10.5 million, equaling 525,000 in interest accruing in year 2. Using the same approach, we can now calculate the interest accrued on the bond in all 5 years. At the end of year 5, the government will repay the whole amount, the originally borrowed 10 million, plus the accrued interest, so that we end with a liability of 0 at the end of year 5. In both cases, the government borrowed 10 million Arctica cubes at 5% interest rate and repaid the whole principal amount at maturity. The only difference in the two arrangements was the cash payment schedule for the interest. And since in the case of the zero-coupon bond, the cash is not paid periodically and therefore not available to the creditor for reinvestment, the debtor pays compound interest, which means that over the 5 years, 2.76 million Arctica cubes of interest accrues and is paid at maturity. This compares with 2.5 million Arctica cubes of interest paid on the loan.